Every single day you wake up to a quiet, invisible war. Before your feet even touch the floor, before you have had a chance to breathe in the morning air, your mind is already being pulled in a dozen different directions by notifications, silent expectations, and a heavy unspoken pressure to perform. You tell yourself that today will be different, that today you will finally conquer that mountain of work. Or step into the gym with absolute focus, or finally begin that creative project you have been putting off for months. Yet, the moment you sit at your desk, a strange, suffocating heaviness settles over your chest. Your hand reaches for your phone almost automatically, seeking a brief escape from the sudden, sharp spike of anxiety that rises within you. You are not lazy, and you certainly do not lack ambition, yet you find yourself trapped in a painful loop of knowing exactly what you need to do, but feeling utterly powerless to actually do it. The world tells you that the only solution to this paralyzing freeze is to push harder, to grind, to force your way through the resistance with brute willpower. But willpower is a fragile, finite resource, and when you try to fight your own brain with raw force, you only end up exhausted, frustrated, and deeply disappointed in yourself. What if the real secret to doing hard things is not about fighting your mind at all, but learning to quietly step aside and let the struggle dissolve on its own? To understand how this shift works, we must look at Kenji, a person who, just like you, possesses incredible potential, immense dreams, and a deeply frustrating daily reality. Kenji starts his day with the best of intentions, carrying a meticulous to-do list and a mind filled with the inspiring words of the productivity gurus he listens to late at night. He knows exactly where he wants his life to go, understands the steps required to get there, and desires success with every fiber of his being. Yet, when the moment of execution arrives, Kenji freezes. As he stares at the flashing cursor on a blank computer screen, a wave of profound discomfort washes over him. To avoid this internal friction, Kenji begins to clean his room, checks his emails for the 10th time, or spends hours researching how to be more productive, all while convincing himself that he is still working. This is the illusion of effort, a subtle trap where we burn massive amounts of mental energy simply worrying about the work, rather than actually doing the work. Kenji's mind has associated the hard task with psychological pain, and because the human brain is wired above all else to protect us from pain, it actively steers him toward comfort, safety, and distraction. Kenji feels like an absolute spectator in his own life, watching his goals drift further away, while he remains anchored to the shore of his own hesitation, completely unaware that his frantic attempts to force himself to work are actually making the resistance much stronger. The tragedy of Kenji's situation, which is the tragedy of the modern mind, is that we have been conditioned to view this mental resistance as a personal failure. We assume that because our brain screams in protest when we try to do something difficult, we must be inherently flawed, undisciplined, or weak. But this is a profound misunderstanding of our biological and psychological design. Your brain is not trying to ruin your life. It is simply operating on ancient survival software that has not been updated for the modern world. In the wild, conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary discomfort was the difference between life and death. When you ask your brain to sit in a quiet room and focus on a complex, abstract task that offers no immediate physical reward, Your survival mechanism views this as a threat. It interprets the mental strain as danger and immediately triggers an impulse to flee towards something safe and instantly rewarding, like a social media feed or a video game. The harder you try to fight this natural evolutionary response with raw willpower, the more your brain panics and digs its heels in. This is why the conventional advice of just do it fails so many of us. It asks us to wage a violent war against our own biology, a war that we are almost guaranteed to lose over the long term. If we want to truly change, we must find a gentler path. To break free from this exhausting cycle, we must look beyond modern productivity hacks and turn to the quiet, timeless wisdom of Eastern philosophy, specifically the concept of Shoshin, or the beginner's mind. Shoshin is the practice of approaching every experience, no matter how familiar, with an attitude of absolute openness, eagerness, and a complete lack of preconceptions. When a true master approaches a difficult task, they do not bring the heavy baggage of their past failures, the suffocating anxiety of future expectations, or the rigid belief that the task must be agonizingly hard. Instead, they approach the task with the clean, unbiased curiosity of a child seeing something for the very first time. For Kenji, the primary reason his mind resists difficult work is because he approaches every task with a massive weight of judgment. He thinks about how long it will take, how perfect it needs to be, and what will happen if he fails. By the time he actually sits down to work, he has already built up a mountain of psychological pressure that makes the task feel utterly monumental. Shoshin teaches us to release this imaginary burden, allowing us to see the work not as a threatening monster to conquer, but as a clean slate, a blank canvas where we are allowed to play, experiment, and learn without the crippling fear of falling short of our own expectations. When you apply Shoshin, you learn to strip away these layers of narrative and see the task exactly as it is, without the drama. Writing a difficult report is no longer a test of your intelligence or a hurdle that determines your entire career. It is simply the act of placing one word after another on a screen. Going to a challenging workout is no longer a grueling battle against your physical limits. It is simply the physical sensation of moving your body through space. By returning to the beginner's mind, you remove the terrifying stories your brain tells you about the difficulty of the task, thereby removing the very fuel that feeds your resistance. You stop trying to predict how hard the journey will be, and instead you focus entirely on the singular, immediate step right in front of you. This is the very foundation of the lotus method. The lotus flower does not force its way through the dark mud by worrying about the sky. It simply grows millimeter by millimeter, entirely focused on the present moment of its own unfolding existence in the mud. By embracing this gentle, curious awareness, you too can begin to dismantle the mental walls that keep you paralyzed. You will start to notice that the resistance you feel is not a solid, immovable obstacle, but rather a passing cloud of thoughts that have no real power over you unless you feed them with your attention, allowing you to quietly step into a state of effortless and peaceful action. Imagine your mind as a quiet, sacred garden. Every thought you choose to entertain, every emotion you feed, and every narrative you replay is like planting a seed deep within its soil. Some seeds naturally grow into resilience, clarity, self-trust, and profound peace. Others grow into prickly weeds of resentment, anxiety, self-doubt, and bitter anger. The garden itself possesses no preference. It does not judge the nature of what you plant. It simply nourishes and grows whatever seeds are repeatedly watered by your conscious attention. Every single time you replay an old insult in your head, every time you mentally argue with someone who criticized you, and every time you obsess over an outcome you cannot control, you are actively pouring water on the very weeds that threaten to choke out your tranquility. Protecting your inner peace is not a passive wish. It is the deliberate practice of becoming intensely selective about what you allow to take root inside your mind. Most people live under the profound misunderstanding that self-control requires an explosive, defensive response to every challenge. They operate under the belief that true strength means always having the last word, proving their intellectual superiority, or demanding that others validate their correctness. But genuine power looks surprisingly calm, quiet, and unhurried. It recognizes that not every mistake by another person requires your correction. Not every misunderstanding demands an elaborate explanation. And not every invitation to an argument deserves your participation. There are moments when simply walking away demands far more courage and internal discipline than winning a shouting match ever could. There are times when your complete silence speaks with a thunderous authority that endless explanations can never replicate. When you feel the overwhelming urge to defend yourself against every minor slight, you are actually revealing an underlying vulnerability. A subtle confession that your self-worth is fragile enough to be damaged by someone else's opinion. Consider how frequently individuals allow their emotional state to be dictated by the moving targets of external opinion. A single word of praise makes them feel invincible, while a slight piece of criticism leaves them feeling utterly worthless. Their internal climate shifts violently depending entirely on whoever happened to speak to them last. In doing so, they unconsciously surrender the steering wheel of their lives to people who may not even understand themselves, let alone care about your well-being. When you live in this hyper-reactive state, your internal environment remains perpetually unstable because it is tied directly to an unpredictable, chaotic outside world. Today, the world may praise you, and tomorrow, it may condemn you. If both outcomes carry equal weight in defining your identity, you will forever remain trapped on an emotional roller coaster, constantly searching for a sense of stability that can never be found externally. To cultivate true unshakability, you must recognize that not every voice deserves a seat at the table of your mind. Some people speak from a place of genuine wisdom and care, while others speak purely out of their own unhealed pain, projecting their insecurities and fears onto you simply because they have never learned to confront them within themselves. When an individual constantly carries bitterness, their words will naturally reflect that bitterness, regardless of how noble your intentions may be. Accepting every external opinion as an absolute truth is equivalent to allowing every stranger walking down the street to enter your home and rearrange your furniture. Before long, your inner dwelling becomes so cluttered with other people's chaos that you no longer recognize your own space. Protecting your peace requires establishing firm mental boundaries, acknowledging that while you cannot control how others choose to behave, you retain total command over whether their behavior becomes a permanent resident in your thoughts. An event itself may last only a few fleeting seconds, yet your mental attachment to that event can persist for months or even years if you refuse to let it go. There is profound transformative power in adopting a single diagnostic question whenever something threatens to disturb your internal equilibrium. Is this truly worth my peace? In the initial moment of friction, your immediate instinct will likely urge you to fight back, to demand justice, or to prove your point. The ego desperately craves validation and triumph, but when you pause and genuinely evaluate the situation through the lens of your long-term peace, you quickly discover that the vast majority of daily annoyances lose their weight almost instantly. The petty argument reveals itself as entirely meaningless. The sharp criticism loses its power to hurt. The temporary inconvenience transforms into a minor detail easily brushed aside. You begin actively choosing internal tranquility over the shallow satisfaction of being right. This shift does not imply that you become a passive bystander in your own life or ignore genuine problems that require action. Real-world challenges will always demand your effort. Important conversations must take place, and healthy personal boundaries must be firmly set. However, these necessary actions become infinitely more effective, precise, and powerful when they arise from a place of deep, internal calm rather than emotional turbulence. Decisions made out of raw anger almost always manufacture new problems, while choices made from a foundation of absolute clarity quietly resolve existing ones. A calm, centered mind perceives creative solutions, subtle opportunities, and clear pathways that an agitated, emotional mind completely overlooks. Think of the individuals who naturally project an aura of steady, unshakable strength. They are rarely the ones making the most noise or desperately seeking attention. They do not rush to impress everyone they meet, nor do they fall apart when circumstances suddenly take a turn for the worse. They move through the world with a quiet, grounded poise because they have realized that their internal state is far too valuable to be traded for temporary victories. Their confidence does not rely on applause, and their clarity does not evaporate simply because someone disagrees with their path. They understand that life will continuously throw unexpected storms at their door, but they firmly refuse to let the storm inside. By guarding what enters your awareness, the content you consume, the conversations you engage in, and the thoughts you choose to water, you take full ownership of your mental landscape. You stop asking how to force the world to understand you and instead focus all your energy on mastering the one domain that was always yours to govern, your own mind. One of the deepest, most exhausting sources of human suffering is the silent, subconscious desire to control that which was never ours to manage. Countless individuals spend the best years of their lives attempting to dictate the behavior of others, control future outcomes, and force reality to conform to their exact expectations. They operate under the grand illusion that if they could just manage every variable, eliminate every uncertainty, and ensure everyone responds to them with complete approval, they would finally earn the right to rest in absolute peace. Yet, the harder they grip the reins of the world, the more perpetually anxious they become. They quickly discover that life is inherently dynamic, human beings are deeply unpredictable, and absolute certainty is a complete myth. Instead of discovering the safety they desperately crave, they find themselves caught in a cycle of frustration, continuously fighting against the natural order of existence. Consider how much of your daily emotional exhaustion stems directly from matters completely outside your direct influence. You waste endless mental bandwidth worrying about whether colleagues truly appreciate your efforts, replaying old conversations to check if you sounded foolish, or dreading hypothetical crises that have not occurred and likely never will. You allow your mood to be ruined by the decisions of strangers, the unsolicited opinions of acquaintances, and global events unfolding thousands of miles away. None of these frantic mental investments grant you an ounce of real control over the situation. They simply hijack your focus, cloud your perspective, and systematically drain your vitality. The mind becomes so congested with imagined battles and defensive strategies that the beauty, opportunity, and truth of the present moment slip away completely unnoticed. This desperate urge for control frequently disguises itself under the noble mask of responsibility. You convince yourself that endless worrying is proof that you care deeply, or that if you analyze a past mistake just one more time, you will somehow rewrite reality. But there exists a profound, uncompromising line between intelligent preparation and emotional resistance. True preparation inspires clean, purposeful action. Emotional resistance produces nothing but mental paralysis and physical tension. One moves you forward with grace, while the other locks you in a cage of overthinking, running the same painful scenarios on repeat without ever yielding a single drop of wisdom or progress. Life has an effortless way of reminding us that our ultimate control is strictly limited. Seasons change without asking for our permission. People evolve in directions we never anticipated. Doors close without warning, and unexpected opportunities open where we least expect them. You can execute every step flawlessly and still encounter temporary failure, just as you can make a glaring mistake and unexpectedly stumble upon a profound breakthrough. This unpredictability is not a flaw in the fabric of reality. It is the very essence of growth. The moment you choose to accept this reality, an extraordinary transformation takes place within your psyche. Acceptance is frequently misunderstood by the fragile ego as passive surrender, weakness, or a total loss of ambition. In truth, authentic acceptance is the ultimate expression of mental clarity and internal strength. It means choosing to see things exactly as they are in the present moment, rather than wasting your life energy arguing with facts that already exist. If dark clouds gather and rain begins to fall, screaming at the sky will not bring back the sun. It simply leaves you exhausted and wet. The wise individual acknowledges the rain without bitterness and simply reaches for an umbrella. In that exact same manner, accepting a difficult circumstance, an unfair setback, or an unpleasant truth allows you to respond with cold, sharp intelligence rather than spiraling into an emotional meltdown over what should have been. There is absolute liberation in mastering the vast difference between influence and control. You possess immense, near total influence over your own actions, your deliberate thoughts, your chosen daily habits, and the attitude you bring into every room you enter. You have influence over how hard you work, how kindly you treat others, and how disciplined you remain when no one is watching. But you have zero absolute control over how the world responds to your effort. You cannot force someone to love you. You cannot guarantee immediate commercial success, and you cannot eliminate every obstacle from your path. When you confuse your sphere of influence with your sphere of control, disappointment is mathematically guaranteed, because your happiness becomes tethered to outcomes you were never meant to dictate. This misstep ruins relationships faster than almost anything else, People enter friendships, partnerships, and family dynamics with an unwritten contract, demanding that others alter their personality, communication style, or worldview to fit a personal blueprint. Every natural disagreement becomes a personal offense, and every difference in perspective is viewed as a threat. Over time, genuine connection is replaced by chronic resentment, because unrealistic expectations continuously shatter against the hard wall of reality. Deep, meaningful connection only flourishes when you stop demanding that people conform to ideal versions of themselves that exist only in your imagination. When you shift your orientation from trying to master the external world to mastering your internal state, your relationship with life changes permanently. You stop viewing every unexpected challenge as a personal attack and instead treat it as a necessary training ground for your spirit. Every difficult person you encounter becomes an opportunity to practice patience. Every sudden setback becomes a lesson in adaptability. Every moment of unexpected isolation becomes a sacred space to deepen your self-trust. You no longer move through the world as a fragile piece of glass waiting to be shattered by the slightest impact. You become like water, effortlessly adapting to every terrain while retaining your fundamental purity and quiet power. True self-mastery is not about building impenetrable armor so that nothing can ever touch you or make you feel pain. It is about developing such deep root systems of self-awareness, clarity, and purpose that no external wind, regardless of its strength, can ever tear you from your foundation. It is recognizing that your peace of mind is your ultimate wealth, and protecting it is your highest responsibility. When you stop chasing validation, stop reacting to every spark of conflict, and finally surrender the impossible burden of trying to control the universe, you step into a state of quiet, unshakable sovereignty. You walk through life fully present, deeply calm, and completely unbothered by the storms that rage around you, carrying an internal light that no external darkness can ever put out.